So I wanted to share a couple little pieces of, I've spent a lot of time visioning and writing about it, written a novel called The Fifth Sacred Thing that's set in the mid-21st century and incorporated some of the visions that I had for what we could potentially be. And I've written a sequel to it called City of Refuge. I just wanted to read you, in the sequel here, in the Fifth Sacred Thing, in that world, Northern California has become this beautiful, ecotopian, feminist, diverse, ecologically balanced kind of place, albeit after massive environmental and social breakdown. But Southern California has gone the opposite direction. And the story really wrestles with the question, how does a peaceful society defend itself when it's confronted with violence? How can you respond to cruelty and violence without becoming what you're fighting against? And I won't spoil it for you, but I will say that in the end, they do succeed in getting the Southlands out of their city and turning a lot of the soldiers who've come up, and really they invite them. They say, there's a place for you at our table if you will choose to join us, and many do. So when City of Refuge starts, they're left with all of these soldiers wandering around their beautiful eco-feminist utopian city who totally weren't raised that way. Totally have no background for it, have no education, aren't sure what to do with themselves, and suddenly it's like, oh, okay, it's all right to invite everyone to our table, but when they sit down and they've got their elbows all over it and they're eating up all the food, like, what do we do? So City of Refuge to me really centers around the question of how do we build a new world when people are so deeply damaged by the old? And so I want to read you a moment between some of the soldiers and the children of the city that incorporates some of my vision of what the world might be if we imagined our cities as places, if our urban design was oriented to make places where children could be completely safe to wander around anywhere in the city, and where the whole city was designed to be a learning experience for the kids. So River is one of the soldiers. And as they're all sitting around, he's looking at the kids and the gardens that have been kind of destroyed by the invaders but are now being rebuilt. The workers around him, River noticed, were mostly young teens and even small children. The adults were working on structures and buildings, leaving the garden repair to the younger ones. In the center of the garden stood a red sphere on a pedestal. "What's that?" River asked one of the older girls. "That's Mars." She looked up at him, her dark straight hair framing an owlish face. "What's Mars?" Thick glasses hid her dark eyes. She was a bit on the old side, but already she had the eyes of the Khalifian women, looking straight into his with no fear or no submission, as if she were a person looking at another person, one she didn't think much of. "It's our neighbor planet," she told him. "What's a planet?" She looked at him sharply, as if she suspected he were joking. "We're standing on one. The Earth is a planet, like a giant ball circling the sun." "Crazy shit." "It's true. How come we don't fall off then?" "Gravity holds us on." "What's gravity?" "Gravity is the Earth's love for her children, holding us close," she said, as if repeating something she'd memorized. "Hey, Tubos," River shouted to his old unit. Come hear this." The girl called her friends over, and the children soon discovered that the soldiers knew almost nothing about the world. They had been taught to read, write, and count, mostly for the convenience of their commanders, but they'd never been given storybooks or even textbooks on anything other than weapons and the simplest of military tactics. Their entertainment came from vid screens, vid games, and failing that, cards. They didn't know that the earth turned around the sun or that compost made soil. They knew nothing of history and were unaware that Califia and the Southlands had once been part of the same state, one of 50 in the same country. They had rarely seen the night sky before they made the long march to the north, and it hadn't occurred to most of them to wonder what those pinpoints of light in the heavens were. Stars had to be explained to them. "Help us rebuild this learning track," the girl said, "and we'll teach you things." "That's an order?" the Ritu asked. The girl frowned. "If you want to be. It's an offer." "An order," River said firmly. The girl held out her hand. "I'm Jasmine. What's your name?" "River." He took her hand and stood looking at it, not sure what to do with it or why she extended it at him. She grasped his, pumped it vigorously, and let it drop. "These other chipsters here don't got names, just numbers," River told her. "So what's this track thing about?" "It's how we learn here. There's different tracks that run all through the city with different learning stations. Right now, we're on the solar system track, and this is the Mars station. The next one out would be Jupiter and then Saturn. It's like a giant scale model. This ball is how big Mars would be if the sun were as big as a giant model of the sun. It used to be in the central plaza, and it's as far away as Mars would be if it were this big." River and the other soldiers just looked at her, mystified. So Jasmine explained that on the solar system track, every planet had a learning station. Mars had its sphere, and around it were gardens with herbs that belonged to Mars and flowers in martial colors, along with statues of war gods from many cultures, Ares and Chongo and Thor. Each had a port for the intelligent crystals that the children wore around their necks. When they touched them to the ports, holograms jumped out with stories, myths, and explanations. They could listen to the Greek and Roman myths or hear the Scandinavian Eddas, and then compare them to the Marvel comics, Thor, and the movies. They could watch video from the early Mars rovers or access the scientific reports from expeditions the scientists had mounted, back when people could still do such things, before the collapse. In their learning groups, they might delve further into the mysteries of space exploration, or write and perform their own Mars space opera, or read Mars-centered science fiction, or create a strategy game about a Mars expedition. So that's a little glimpse of a vision. And like I said, I think in these times it's especially important to have vision, because it's really easy to get ground down under the press of urgency and hopelessness and despair and accept sort of what they like to tell us, which is that we're doomed and there's not much we can do about it. I don't believe that we are doomed unless we accept that we are. I actually believe that hope and possibility and potential are infinite in the universe, and that the earth and that human culture have enormous powers of healing and resilience that we can tap once we make up our minds to do so. So I think we need to know both what our vision is and also what the real solutions and what the real approaches are that we can take to deal with climate change. We need models. And there are some really amazing and wonderful models here in British Columbia. Our eco-village where I'm teaching is one. We had a wonderful tour to a place called EcoSense in Victoria. Anyone ever been there? It's an amazing homestead that two people started just on the outskirts of the city and have done incredible home and gardens and food forests where all the systems are integrated. There are community gardens we've been to in Victoria, Mason Street and Spring Hill Commons. There are co-housing communities. There are amazing models all around us. And I encourage you, if you're here or wherever you are, to seek out some of the models that exist and go look at them, because they'll cheer you up when you're feeling down. And they will expand your sense of possibility. And again, it doesn't mean that everybody has to go build themselves a cob house and plant a food forest. That's probably not how the change is going to happen. But I think the things that you can learn and see from someone who has done that, and from understanding in that very visceral way what it means to put together systems where the rain, collects and provides some of your drinking water and your washing water, and your gray water from your laundry and your sink go down and irrigate your orchards, and the fruit from the orchard provides some of the food you eat and feeds your chickens, and it's all integrated and all connected. That's something that can help us make that shift in consciousness. So one of the other tools I use besides magic is permaculture, which is a whole system of ecological design. It draws a lot on indigenous knowledge and wisdom and traditional knowledge from many, many parts of the world. It was started by two Australians, Bill Mollison and David Holmgren, back in the 70s. And it's really grown into a worldwide movement. And I got involved in it after many decades of writing about the goddess and earth-based spirituality, and my feeling that we needed to make the shift on a deep spiritual, community, cultural level. And then when I learned about permaculture, it was like, yeah, and this is this is the how-to part. This is the how we grow food part and how we sustain ourselves while we do this part. I think there's a great value in, again, applying the shift even to something as concrete as your garden. Well, hopefully your garden's not concrete. But, it's interesting to me, after I took my first permaculture course, I came back home and I was like, yeah, I understand. This is not about just planting a garden in rows. It's about creating a little ecosystem. It's about understanding how everything fits together. It's about everything exactly what I've been saying we need to do. But what I really want is this rose that I just saw in the catalog. That looks so pretty. Some people go to bed with Playboy, and some of us go to bed with the White Flower Farm catalog. And have plant lust. And it's really hard to get beyond that, because it is really pretty, that rose, but if in permaculture we're kind of looking at it going, well, it's not just about how pretty that rose looks, it's about what role that rose is going to play in a whole system. Is it going to provide pollen for pollinators and nectar? Well, maybe that really pretty one isn't, because it's so bred and so complicated that no bee can get through all those petals. Maybe a simpler rose or a native rose or a rugosa rose would actually help the bees a lot more. That rose has many characteristics, has beautiful flowers, but it might also have thorns. So where can I put it in my garden where its thorns are actually going to be a help to me, not a hindrance? If I put it right next to my main walking path, I may regret it for years to come. Every time I go into the garden, I'll be offering a little blood sacrifice to the rose. But if I put it on the fence where the neighbor's annoying children are always climbing over and stealing my fruit, right? That may be a lot more ornamental and effective than barbed wire, right? Yeah. So you start thinking like that, and you start trying to do that in your garden. You realize it's challenging, it's difficult. You're wrestling with all these different factors. But if you start doing that, then gradually it does start to shift your thinking. And if you can make that shift in thinking in your garden, you can also understand that some of the things you learn in your garden might actually apply to other areas of life. We are fond of every time we see something or experience something that we don't like or we feel is threatening, again, at least in the U.S., we declare war on it. War on drugs, war on terror. Something's bad out there, those bad people, nuke them, kill them, get rid of them. Just like we declare war on bugs in the garden. And of course, if you're doing industrial, conventional agriculture, you see a pest in the garden, get out the spray, nuke it, kill it dead, get rid of it. The problem is when you try to kill that bug, you're spraying your food with poison, which most of us, if we stopped and thought about it, might think it's probably not a really great thing to do. The other thing is the more you try to kill that bug, the more the bugs develop resistance. You're never going to kill all of that bug. You kill a lot of it, but there'll always be one or two that survive. And those one or two that survive are the ones that can withstand that pesticide. And what do you know? Soon they'll breed, right? And then you'll have more bugs, and then you'll have more bugs. And that's actually what's happened over the past 50 years of using chemical pesticides. Insects have developed tremendous resistance. And we now use far more pesticides than we did, say, back in the 1950s, late 40s, when we actually started using them in order to use up some of the war chemicals that were left over from World War II. And we have more bug damage. So it's a vicious cycle. If you're a permaculturalist, you look at that bug in your garden, you go, that bug is information. That bug is telling me something's not working in my system. Maybe my plant is vulnerable because maybe the soil needs feeding. Maybe I'm growing too many of the same plant too close together. I'm creating beautiful habitat for the bug, right? And maybe if I mixed it up with some fragrant herbs, that would confuse the bug, and it wouldn't be able to find its way so easily. Maybe I need to plant something that's going to bring in predators that are going to eat that bug. Maybe what I need to do is say, what are the conditions that are favoring this pest, and change those conditions so that they'll favor the things that I want. Now imagine if we thought about that politically. If instead of saying, let's kill the terrorists, we stopped and said, well, what are the conditions that are breeding this response? And how can we change those conditions so that we're not creating fertile habitat for terror, but we're actually creating fertile habitat for connection and growth and understanding. I don't think we then approach it by saying everyone from certain countries is bad and evil and wrong. Everyone who practices the Muslim religion is dangerous. Let's get rid of them. In fact, it's now coming out that in the recent French elections, Marine Le Pen, who was the right-wing candidate who was promoting, the xenophobia and the racism, separatism, her biggest supporters, the ones who were secretly releasing and hacking emails and stuff, were actually Daesh, the organization we often call ISIS. I don't think it's fair to call this organization after the beautiful Egyptian goddess who was the goddess of regeneration, right? It favors terrorism to have right-wing hatred and racism and Islamophobia because it generates the resentment and the fear that recruits more people to those organizations. So I think we can learn a lot if we understand that nature actually has patterns and ways of working, and we understand what those things are. They can often guide us in many, many areas of our life, not just in how we put our garden together.